So for today's talk, I wanted to, I went down with a little play on, the famous book and Stanley Kubrick film, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. If you haven't seen or read this great piece during the Cold War, you'll know that they don't really learn to love the bomb. But I wanted to acknowledge the anxieties and the very legitimate anxieties that are around these technologies, and to find a way to acknowledge them, think about them, but also critically embrace, if not cautiously make entries into the use of this in our research in particular. And so you will find that I will be seeking to chart a bit of a middle ground, a pragmatic middle ground where we remain critical, we remain in control, but we cautiously and sometimes energetically use these technologies. A little bit about my background. I research electronic literature and digital writing, which is writing and literature that's designed to take advantage of what computers and digital media can do, right? And I've been studying this for over 20 years, really studying the impact of digital technologies on writing. As part of that joint task force on AI, it's not every day that what is a fairly niche little corner of the field of English and literary studies suddenly has something to say to broad concerns, right, that people have. And so I brought some of my expertise to the work of this task force and I'll be sharing some of the products that we have produced that offer guidance on a number of areas. But a little context. Oh, by the way, throughout this whole talk, you're going to see these CyberLeos, I call them, or these sort of cyborg avatars of me. The yellow glasses are a common pattern. There are other things. I just kind of have some fun with it. But there's a theoretical kind of metaphor at play here as well, which I'll explain in a bit. So from my perspective, right, as someone who's been studying digital writing and electronic literature, in 1953, we have the first Christopher Strachey programmed on one of the very first computers to ever leave the military to go to a university. Using the Manchester Mark I computer, he created a love letter generator. So this is the beginnings. We have been generating text with computers and programs for over 70 years, right? And when this AI, exploded, people are like, oh my God, now computers can write. Yeah, they've been doing it for a while, right? When you have some expertise and knowledge of the history, we've been seeing this coming. And here's a few touch points along the way. 1964, Eliza is the first chatbot or chatterbot done at MIT by Joseph Weizenbaum. You may be familiar with this, but again, it used teletype to make it seem like you were chatting with a Rogerian psychologist that would always refocus attention on you. It might remember something that you had said and bring it up later, creating the illusion of it's listening to me, right? There's a lot of sort of social engineering and trickery, including things like personification, right? And giving it the name Eliza. By the way, the literary connection with Eliza Doolittle from Pygmalion, which is in also a reference to the Greek myth. So the literary resonances go deep in all of these technologies. 1983, William Chamberlain published a book that was purported to be the first book ever written by a computer using a program called Racter. And essentially it was kind of a hybrid creation. Yes, he used this program to generate text, but then he selected text that went into the book. So there is a human curation of computer-generated work. Still drew some headlines. 1984, Hugh Kenner published a travesty generator for micros, which essentially, I mean, and this was in Byte magazine. This was back when those of us who would subscribe to it, we would type up, they would have the code, right, in Pascal or BASIC or whatever programming, and you type it up on your own computer and then run that code. And essentially, this travesty generator was, you know, if AI is a large language model, this is a small language model. What it does is you feed it any excerpt, any chunk of text, and it will create a probabilistic model to generate new text based on that text, right? So again, it's very rudimentary, but it's doing essentially what AI systems do at a much more advanced level, right? There has been from 1990 to 2019, there was a Loebner Prize for chatbots. The goal was to try to pass the Turing test to make it seem like people were chatting with a human being rather than a bot. And after 2019, they discontinued it. I think the chatbot technology leading up to you know, the GPTs and all that really it wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't a challenge anymore. Ongoing, the most published author in the history of humanity. His name is Philip M. Parker, and he's been using for decades computer programs to generate books. They are not exciting books. These are report kind of books, but very niche. He has a variety. He's published over 1 million books using Amazon and other publishing services. But yeah, he just has a kind of computational studio and he's just cranking out books. Probably not going to win any awards for any of them unless there's an award for volume. You may have heard of National Novel Writing Month in the month of November, NaNoWriMo. Well, about a little over 10 years ago, someone suggested National Novel Generation Month, in which people spend the month of November writing code that will generate a 50,000 word novel. And there's over 1,000 novels that people have created using GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, but even using technologies before that. So in looking at the NaNoGenMo kind of outputs out there, you can actually see the emergence of this in terms of experimental and digital writing. Anyways, in November 2022, ChatGPT was launched. And a moral panic ensued. Everyone freaked out. I mean, it really caught us academics pretty unprepared. Those of us who didn't already do this kind of work, which were very few. You have essays like the college essay is dead. Nobody's prepared for how AI will transform academia. And there were many other aspects of the moral panic. And, you know, the thing about a moral panic is, and I mean, there are legitimate causes for concern with these technologies, all right? So I don't want to minimize that. But what makes a moral panic is that we take those as starting points to then clamp on a bunch of other concerns that we might have and have an outsized reaction to it. So for example, some of the aspects of the moral panic around AI, students will cheat with AI. That was an early one. AI is a plagiarism machine. But I mean, it didn't invent plagiarism, right? Plagiarism has been around. AI will displace writers and artists. That's an ongoing one. We had unions really kind of coming in, guilds, writers' guilds. AI will take your job. AI steals your intellectual property. That's a big one right now with some of the kind of lawsuits and you know, copyright concerns. Kids won't learn to think or create, right? It'll just squash creativity. AI is financially unsustainable. For a minute, people were like, "Oh no, OpenAI is losing money with this. They'll go under and they'll be over in a moment." No, not true. I mean, you might remember similar reports when Amazon was up and coming. Oh, they're losing money every year. It didn't go away, did it? And AI is bad for the environment, and that is a very active one. For example, Washington Post a few months ago had a piece on the water usage, right? The hidden environmental costs of using AI chatbots, and they're talking about the server farms and the amount of energy and water they use. They have things, right, where they're talking about, you know, it takes, basically it calculated, you know, how much water. It was like every time you type in a prompt for AI to write you an email, it's like spilling out a bottle of water. And a lot of folks were like, yes, now I can take the principled refusal of AI because I don't, you know, water and energy. And yes, there are concerns, but when you compare it to things like, I don't know, a pound of beef, right? To produce a pound of beef, it takes 6,992 liters of water, and training ChatGPT is about 100 pounds of beef. I mean, if you think about it, Ted Underwood put it really well. If you don't eat a hamburger, you can ask ChatGPT to write 3,368 emails. So when we put things on the balance, right, and I know this is a big barbecue town, so, you know, all respect to vegans also, right, but there's a lot of like meat, right? Nobody's having a moral panic about that at the scale of AI. So we're taking our environmental concerns and we're just kind of mapping them onto this. This doesn't mean there are real concerns for energy use on server farms and things like that. But if we put this in perspective, this is something that was published in Nature just last month, right? The projected electricity growth is the demand for electricity should go up 26% by 2030. Most of it is the electrification of industry, air conditioning, and electric cars, not data centers. So, you know, electric vehicles. These are generally thought of as a good thing. Personalities of major electric vehicle companies notwithstanding, right? But the data center thing that draws a lot of concern really is a pretty small portion. The data centers don't just serve AI, they serve streaming services. Nobody's having a moral panic about streaming services. And streaming services consume huge amounts more. I mean, orders of magnitude more than what AI data centers and AI need. So these are common infrastructures for computation. What's happening is there's greater needs for computation, and yes, AI has accelerated that. But, you know, again, there's legitimate concerns. We want to demand more energy efficient practices and more environmentally friendly practices. But I think AI is becoming a bit of a scapegoat in all this. Some other concerns, and this is my most negative slide. When I think about the expected social impact of AI technologies, it's already been used and will continue to be used unethically, whether it's by students to cheat or other folks to cheat in writing-based evaluations, to create fake content and to plagiarize content for profit. You know, this will go on. It'll probably get worse. It will also adversely affect academia in terms of empowering further attacks from, the way I see it, ed tech companies trying to say, oh, you don't need a writing center, you could have an AI tutor, right? I think that would be horribly damaging and not the kind of outcome we would want. It is going to have an impact in labor. It'll change writing-based jobs. Overnight, with these technologies being implemented, you know, we have folks who went from writing copy to editing AI-generated copy, right? Like, the job just changed very quickly. Politics, it's going to have its impact with fake news and misinformation. And I think in general, and this is a trend that I'm seeing sort of nationwide of late, there's going to be a general sort of turning away from academia, which is not good. But also, I think there, amongst the sort of less educated, uncritical populace, there's going to be diminished learning and diminished writing and critical thinking skills. And I think universities will prepare students to have an edge, a competitive edge, in an AI-inflected world. Thinking about the role of the humanities. I know this is a diverse audience of different areas, but you know, humanities are essential to develop critical AI literacy. The kinds of skills and training we're going to prepare citizens, right, to critically engage with and use AI technologies more effectively. And will help prepare professionals with much needed writing and critical thinking skills. And this humanities training will help people address and mitigate problems caused by AI bias, such as bias, digital divides, and so on. Now, some of the guidance that we have published in the MLA 4C's task force on AI and writing, I'll just show you a few of these. So if you go to aiandwriting.hcommons.org, the first working paper we published, this was in July of 2023, does a sort of initial look at the state of AI and its, you know, challenges and recommendations in terms of academia. Working paper 2 came out about a year later, March 2024. It focuses on policy at department levels, at university levels, all over. So if you're thinking about institutional policy, department policy, you might want to see some of the guidance there. Working paper 3, this was published in September, late September, early October of 2024. Focuses on building a culture for generative AI literacy in college language, literature, and writing. And so this is where we kind of chart a middle path of sort of critical literacy and where we think we need to be moving. Not everyone agrees with this. There is a whole refusal camp that has been pushing hard, and that's fine. We also published a student guide to AI literacy, and this is published, where is this? Here it is. This is a sort of one-page printable document designed for students, which, you know, kind of summarizes the key ideas in that working paper 3. And back in January of 2024, we published an initial guidance for evaluating the use of AI in scholarship and creativity. And this arose from concerns from the community, publishers, granting agencies like the National Endowment for the Humanities and things like that, about like how do they assess work that has been produced with AI. And so we, you know, try to chart what creative or scholarly work that makes use of AI in purposeful, responsible ways, what characteristics do they have? We talk about, and I will elaborate on these when I'm presenting in a little further. I'll give you a more thought out and advanced version of this. But again, just to draw attention to these products that you might find useful. I will make the slideshow is publicly available on my website, leonardoflores.net, and I'm sure we can share it with you all later. All right, let's continue. Let's see if I can go back to full screen. Yes, here we go. So let's think about what are some good ways of using AI. Well, AI can be an assistant. It could be a supplement to your own thinking and writing. And it can lead to what I like to call cyborg writing practices. So let's have a brief theory moment. I want to draw from Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto. She published this, the first iteration of it, back in 1985. And it is a text that has aged very well. I don't know if you're familiar with this work, but it's a feminist critique of this idea of the cyborg, which was very much in circulation in the sort of mid 80s. Movies like RoboCops and Terminators and all that kind of thing. She defines the cyborg as a cybernetic organism, a hybrid of machine and organism, a creature of social reality as well as a creature of fiction. And I think one of the interesting things about her definition is that it doesn't focus too hard on the human. This becomes later a foundation for some other critical writing she has done on post-humanism. So it could be animals, right, and cybernetic machines. But also, it goes beyond the sort of literal cyborg that we see in fiction, right, in the movies, like RoboCop or things like that. It's less prosthetic and it's more human being shaped by social technologies, right? Data signals, like she argues that we are all, and back in 1985, we were all already cyborgs, right? We're already shaped by information tools, technologies all around us. Now, to think about cyborg writing, I would suggest that we're all already cyborg writers. We use word processing software that has integrated spell and grammar checkers, and now more and more AI assistants and AI tools. We have suggested or predictive text, suggested text in emails and documents. If you're ever writing on an email on Gmail, for example, on the web, it is suggesting headers and sentences. It'll complete phrases for you. And you can just kind of click and you're cyborg writing. Predictive keyboards and text, when you use touchscreen devices, you don't type every single letter of a word. You start typing and it will present you guesses as to where they think you're going, and then you just kind of click on that and the word comes through. Computational writing, which is like kind of electronic literature work that's generative. Natural language generation in general has been around for decades. And now generative AI technologies that are increasingly integrated into operating systems, word processors, etc. So if we start exploring cyborg writing, well, AI is very good at imitating style. This was true with the Markov chain models. It may generate nonsensical kind of things, but it is in the style. It does capture voice. So you can train AI systems with your writing. You can give it a sample of your writing of the genre you might want to do, and it will try to replicate your voice in a way. It's very good at summarizing, and it's good at extrapolating. Let's say you're writing on something and you are stuck. AI can say, and you could ask, where am I going next with this? And it can extrapolate based on the points you've made, the arguments you're making. It will surprise you. It will show you things that, I don't know, maybe you just weren't aware of. And it does save you time and effort. And I'll highlight a few ways in which it can do that. There are problems with AI. It is inaccurate. It's prone to fabrication, the famous hallucinations. It has biases in its data set. It's not good at source attribution. It's getting better, but it's not good, and that can lead to plagiarism. It's an easy shortcut and can substitute for doing the work yourself, right? The temptation that, let's say, many students take. And it doesn't really know the field. It doesn't. We're the experts. We're the ones that know the field. So to think about some guiding principles for using AI in our research, how can we do this well? And I've listed a sort of kind of building off of those initial thoughts that I showed you earlier, a more complete and more thorough way of thinking through this. So I'll go through them one by one. AI literacy. So first thing, we need to cultivate AI literacy. We need to seek to understand the capabilities, limitations, benefits, and harms offered by this technology. We don't have to be experts. We don't have to become prompt engineers. We don't have to read everything just so we can start using it. But we do need to keep our eye on it, our eye on the technology, and understand. And if there's any big breakthroughs that, suddenly its ability to accurately cite gets much better, we want to be aware of that, right? So that we can use it that way. Right now, I wouldn't recommend it, right? And again, we want to think about all the issues around these technologies, and we want to make informed decisions about if, when, and how to use AI technologies. Control. As researchers, we should be in control of all aspects of our research and writing. All right? We're in control. Like, if this is a cyborg, right? If we're cyborgs, it's that human brain that needs to be running things, even though we may have some AI prosthesis or help, right? I like to make specific requests of AI that are informed by my ideas, all right? So your ideas need to be guiding any kind of AI usage. And AI is a supplement, it's an assistant, it's an enhancement for our expertise. Let's talk about expertise. So AI works best in the hands of people with expertise. You can't delegate expertise to the AI because you won't be able to tell when an idea it presents hasn't been attributed correctly or if it's a fabrication, right? As experts, it's our job to curate, to think, to research, to read, to process, identify, right, from that space of expertise, where are the needs, where are the contributions, where are the most valid arguments. That level of, expert guidance, AI doesn't have. And so you need to be up to date in your field and review the literature. Sorry, there's no shortcuts around this. We still have to do our homework. AI can help, right? Like, that expertise should guide that whole research and writing activity, not the AI. So let's say you want to refresh your reading on a number of things, on something you're writing about or doing research about. You do your research, you talk to your librarian, you do your searches, you get your sources, and then you have to read a whole bunch of things. Well, AI can help with some summaries. It can help you kind of take a faster look into a piece to see if it's really worth you putting in the time to read that piece thoroughly. So it can be a sort of a first filter that can help you, prepare to process. Ultimately, though, you still have to do the homework, right? You still have to know when something is making a contribution. Originality, right? You need to do the hard work of formulating your ideas. We all do. And if and when we use AI-generated ideas, we need to recognize when such ideas make legitimate contributions to our argument or to the field, right? It's not And I mean, imagine the situation where you're venturing into an area you don't have the same expertise as your primary areas. And instead of doing the homework, you ask the AI, hey, tell me, what are the trends, what are the ideas, what hasn't been written about in this area? And it gives you something, and you're like, oh, right, well, I'm gonna do that. Now, all of a sudden, you are venturing into a space that you don't know if those ideas that you think are going to be a great contribution weren't already said by someone, probably someone major in the field, because AI picks up on the biggest things, right, that have the most impact. I mean, again, you won't be able to tell. If you ask that of an area that you are well versed in, and it gives you this idea, and you're like, oh, no, so-and-so said this years ago, or so-and-so published about this, you have the expertise to tell, right? So these are some of those danger points in terms of using AI. So AI assistants, you might want to think of using AI the way you might use a graduate research assistant. So let AI do work it is well suited for, such as converting voice to text. I was earlier talking about how when I give talks such as this, I love when they're recorded. This is recorded. And if not, I will use my phone and record it. And then I will use an AI voice to text kind of conversion, right? I'll convert my voice into a transcript. That transcript is usually pretty rough. And so I'll use the AI to kind of clean it up into prose, right? Sentences and paragraphs. And then that becomes, I'll copy paste that into a word processing document. That becomes the foundation of actually writing, right? So it's my ideas, it's my research, it's my expertise. What AI has done is simply put it in a way that I can then process and work with, develop. Usually those talk transcripts double or triple in size as I continue to do my research and do my writing. But, you know, I used to do this with a grad student, right, who would clean up these transcripts, and this will do it in minutes instead of weeks. So that's really good. Utilitarian, kind of formulaic writing. I mean, folks, letters of recommendation. I love my students, and I want to always give them a great letter of recommendation. I also use AI to help me write them, right? So I have a trained little kind of model. I use ChatGPT a lot, but I've also dabbled in the other ones. And I will tell, write a letter of recommendation for this person, for this purpose, based on this information, and that will give it a list of very granular things about all the great things I think about this student or this person. And then it will generate a draft, and then I'll copy paste that. I'll go sentence by sentence, make sure I'm 100% in agreement with what it's saying. And then in the end, I'll put my signature to it and send it. And it's, you know, people have gotten acceptances and won awards based on not just my recommendation, but you know what I mean. It's again, same as like providing feedback at the end of a paper. Like sometimes students frequently will turn in a PDF. I can't annotate that. I'm not gonna spend all this time using an iPad to try to recreate the page to then do written notes. No, I take notes as I'm reading, and then I will have the AI summarize it in a paragraph. And I make sure it's accurate, and that's what they get along with the grade. But it's my ideas doing a kind of cyborg writing process. Citation formatting. Sometimes I'll turn something in, you know, I'm in English, so I do MLA. And I turn in my article and I say, oh no, this needs to be in Chicago style or in APA style. It's like, AI, convert this to Chicago style. It does it, copy paste, there you go. It may not be perfect Chicago style, but I can't do perfect Chicago style. So, you know, I'll let the copy editors do that last final processing. Transparency. You want to cite and acknowledge how you use AI tools, if you use them. This doesn't mean you're going to overshare and get into the weeds of your process. We don't disclose our tools of choice and writing process in general. You might consider saving and sharing, or sharing if needed, the AI chat transcript that shows how you used it. And so keep your receipts, so to speak. If your work is challenged and they say that you didn't write this, have your receipts. You have that chat transcript that shows how that process was. Ethics and accountability. You're accountable for what you put out into the world. You benefit from the cultural or other capital generated by your research, whether it's created with AI technologies or not. Any failures, so we get the benefits. If there's any failures in attribution, fabrication, plagiarism, or unmitigated bias in the work that was published that might have been caused by AI, that's still our responsibility, right? Because we put our name to it. We're supposed to vet these things. This is why I urge caution in using AI in areas beyond your expertise. Finally, curiosity. Stay curious about AI-powered research tools. These are early days. This technology can be leveraged as a powerful interface to explore big data sets, databases, archival collections, repositories, and other corpora. I mean, in the digital humanities, this was called, a few decades ago, distant reading, where, you know, instead of doing all this close reading on a particular novel of, you know, from the Victorian period, the 19th century in England, and really kind of go, no. Franco Moretti said, no, let's use digital humanities tools. Let's create tools that allow us to ask questions of the entire corpus of 19th century novels, so we can kind of understand bigger things. And so from close reading, a small amount of text, he proposed distant reading, large amounts of text. So AI can really help us do things like that. But these tools are still under development, so I would recommend staying open, staying curious about these emergent tools, and always cultivating our AI literacy. And that includes being critical about them. Thank you. And the last image I generated is a nod to what is kind of a viral moment where everyone's turning everything in a Studio Ghibli style thing. So I went with a Studio Ghibli version of me and my robot assistant. So good times. All right, happy to take any questions you might have. We have a microphone.
I'll bring you the microphone if you have a question.
I'm in a field where accuracy is really important. I'm in law school. And we're particularly concerned about use by students. We want them to use it well, and we're offering some training. But I've already had instances where professors bring me a paper and say, I suspect this is written by AI, but I can't tell. And can you tell? Usually I can't. I say suspicion, you can't prove it. Do you have any suggestions for that kind of situation, or how we should change? Professors are thinking of not offering classes that end with the final project of this paper.
Yeah.
Or almost anything creative.
that is one of the great challenges. We have certainly thought about it quite a bit. Here are some suggestions. One, I believe that we need to, so first of all, let's take this moment to think about how we rethink our pedagogy and make, thoughtful decisions about it. I think this is a moment where, let's say the way I design paper assignments, and of course, we do a lot of writing in English, right? Is that I design them in ways that it's very difficult for AI to be used to kind of fake it, right? So for example, I will require that students reference contexts that arise from class discussion. Materials we have discussed in class. AI doesn't have access to that. And the student that comes to class pays attention, does the reading, and is therefore aware of those contexts, right? Those students are privileged in this kind of writing assignment. They're the ones who are least likely to cheat. It's the ones who are checked out, who are not coming to class, who are barely unprepared, right? They are not going to have the context to even feed it into an AI system. So what happens is that is one point of criteria where I might be suspecting that this piece was generated with AI, but you're still not meeting one of the criteria, right? The other thing I like to do is to foreground what the learning outcomes are. Why am I assigning this, right? We typically assign things and don't lay our pedagogical cards on the table. We're like Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid, right? You're waxing on and waxing off, right? And the student doesn't know why they're being made to do this, and eventually it's revealed, oh yeah, you've been learning all these things. A great magical moment. Turns out he is a good teacher. But no, we need to say, all right, here's what I want you to learn from this activity, and then make them responsible for their own learning. And I say, as long as you are not getting in the way of these pedagogical goals, these learning outcomes, use AI any way you see fit. And so I get mixed results, but everyone gets mixed results. We try to make this into teaching opportunities. I see a question in the back. I hope that helps. There's no AI proofing, for sure.
So that conversation leads me to think when you said, oh, but we are in control, right? And I'm like, no, it's like a pit bull, right? And you gave the 8-year-old, because yeah, I can be in charge of my dog, but you don't give a trained attack dog to a child because maybe they're not very good at control, right? And with this recurrent use of AI in classroom assignments, I think what I would love to hear your thoughts on is how do we develop that liberal arts sort of humanities? The goal is to have the citizenry that is able to think and be mindful and address ideas and play with them. How do we use our educational tools even with the assist of AI, right? How do we get to a place where they're doing the thinking and the mindfulness piece, right? Oh, I know that's a context, and then I also can agree, disagree, or improve, right?
Absolutely. One of the things I'm trying to do by highlighting, just kind of scrolling through my blog, you will see that I've given a number of talks on this topic, including, let me see, that's when the big AI flood begins. But I have, so for example, this presentation was really focused, what you just heard is focused on research and us as researchers and experts. The thing about students is they're developing expertise, they're creating expertise, they're cultivating skills. there are many kinds of assignments that we give students that is about developing their ability to think through writing, to express, to learn about a field, to do the research, right? And so I think all of these things are, I'm trying to find a really good example. I think this keynote, I have that's actually recorded, but in the slideshow, I have a couple of slides that kind of help that way. Let me go, oh, here it is. Guidance for faculty, right? So this answers, I hope, both of your questions, right? Here's the thing. We need the skills that we need to prepare our students for are research and thinking and writing skills, among others, right? Mathematical skills, etc. However, we're also preparing them for the world. And the world is a world that's shaped by, affected by, infected, if you will, by AI. And so if we're preparing them the way we were prepared, right, before AI technologies, we might be doing them a disservice. On the other hand, if we prepare them sort of the pre-AI way, or sort of the, I don't want to say old-fashioned because it's just kind of foundational, right? But if we they will also have a kind of edge. So there are pros and cons to both. It's like as a parent, I know that I made some choices as a parent in terms of access to digital technologies, video games, screens, iPads, iPhones, that kind of thing with my children. Whereas I know that some parents chose to really limit those technologies and focus them on books and reading and material things, right? Like Legos rather than Minecraft, that kind of thing. And so, again, I think the world needs both kinds of children. The ones that have that sort of wonderful focus and the ones that are also, it also needs those who are really up on their digital technologies and contemporary ways of expression and art forms and things like that. Other questions?
Thanks, Leo. Dr. Leo?
Leo's great.
One of the things that I noted that NLA was recommending was transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I grapple with, because I think use of AI at this stage can signal I took shortcuts, or this really isn't my work. So how do you gauge when transparency should happen, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, when we made these initial recommendations, our most controversial statement was this, right after we described what this looks like. We say, it is important that when evaluating work that has used AI in its writing process, that reviewers assess the work on its own merits, regardless of what they may know about the use of AI. Prejudice and backlash against authors who use these technologies is unacceptable, especially when they're following the guidelines described above, largely because it would discourage transparency about the use of AI in the writing process. So if I'm reading a work as a peer reviewer, let's say, and I sense that AI has been used, the question I need to ask myself isn't, oh, AI was used, reject, right? Instant reviewer number 2 stance, right? No. Does this person know what they're writing about, right? I'm asking the same questions I used to ask. Is this expertise evident? Has this person done their homework? Is this a well-constructed argument, well-supported argument, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Whether AI was used or not, I mean, if someone just used AI, let's say in not the ways I have recommended here today, but to kind of, this is not my area, but I'm using AI to write about this, or I used AI to do my thinking for me, it starts to show in the writing. It's bad writing. I mean, that's the thing. It can, AI can sort of pass the Turing test in terms of making us think that this was written by a human, dang, it's a mediocre human, right? It's not writing up to the standards that we're used to, right? And so, you know, but I do have concerns about transparency in the sense that I know that there's a lot of moral panic and prejudice against anything AI generated. And I mean, even with some of the examples that I share of how I use AI writing, I can see in some audience members, not just here, wherever I give these talks, I can see how for some folks it's a bridge too far. And you know, like it's an interesting gauge of people's comfort levels. Yeah. Microphone incoming.
Hi. So I have a lot of friends who are artists and writers, and the argument that I hear against AI the most, and I really just want to hear your thoughts on this. So this isn't a question, this is a statement. Like with AI, the graphics, it's easier to feel the ethical issue, because from what I've been informed is that a lot of the AI art, it goes out and it finds other people's art and then it kind of combines it into a form and then spits something out. And you can say, oh, that's great, or oh, that's not great. And you know, people are doing transparency about it. But with writing, it's the same way, that it goes out and looks at all these different words that somebody else said and puts them together. Like it might take a sentence from this person's book, it might take a sentence from this person's research paper, and then it puts it all together. So each sentence is really not new. It's not AI generated. It's actually that's the plagiarism article or argument that people are saying. Yeah. That all of it is derivative. All of it is other people's work, Frankenstein together, and therefore any use of it in like AI generated images or anything like that. Like I've had some really heated and lost friends over discussions about this. So I would love to hear your thoughts on like the generation of AI itself, and then how that like declines the value of what it actually generates.
Yeah, you know, these are interesting times in the sense that this technology has been deployed at a time, let's say 20-some years, or you know, after the internet really took off, and the internet brought an ethos of open, right? There's a lot of open work. There's open scholarship. There's there's a whole movement on open access where, you know, I myself like to publish in spaces that will make the work available, right? And there's all kinds of models that have developed around that. And I think these technologies, these companies, large kind of Silicon Valley kinds of companies, basically took advantage of all that. Right? And all that goodwill. Like, listen, I saw a fascinating paper on how AI's ability to really even read and understand images was trained on community alt tags. When we describe images, alt tags are when we describe images for people who are accessing the web on a browser for visually impaired folks, and there's a kind of textual description and representation. That, I mean, these huge services where people would share photos and images and art came with alt tags. So again, surprise, surprise, once again, we have become the product, or been made the product, not the consumer, except it's that weird thing that Facebook does where, you know, we are giving it data that it's then using it to feed us advertising, and it's right. So we have become this sort of. It's a time of this sort of big tech prospecting, kind of big stealing of things. However, so I have my mixed feelings about all that, and of course. I want artists and writers to be paid for their work. That's at the heart of things, right? But I think some of the big problems we're having is with capitalism. And we have, I think, really mixed feelings about capitalism. Oh, great, yeah, free open source, I will share, I will put an MIT license, I will put a Creative Commons license. which by the way, I do with all my syllabi, all my courses I create blogs for, all the materials that I share, I slap on a Creative Commons license and I put it out there for the world to use. And it is frequently cited and built upon, and so as long as there's the courtesy of attribution and citation and all these things, we're talking about building cultural capital and that kind of thing. Of course, I have the privilege of being an academic, right, with tenure, working within a system that privileges and values cultural capital. So it's different to be an independent artist or scholar and have your work lifted. The point is, it's really complicated, right? We don't own the words, right? These words have been around for centuries. We arrange them in many combinations. We sometimes find them. I mean, like Kenneth Goldsmith back in 2000 typed up an entire issue of the New York Times a day, right? He typed it up and he called it They. And it took him the better part of a year to type it up and publish it as a, one of his uncreative writing projects. He didn't write a single word, except he wrote every word or typed every word. So it was very labor intensive. It was sort of this artisanal data scraping and repurposing into then something that came from many writers to fall under a complete reframing of a book called They, for instance. And I mean, so this is just one example. Of course, he's not making a ton of money with this, so we don't have the same kind of qualms about it. But when the big corporations get richer and more powerful and even start having impact in government and life, then we become more resentful. So I don't have an easy answer for this. I think it's really complicated and it's tied into ideas of ownership and profit and capitalism and, even our scholarship that we publish in peer-reviewed journals then get put together repackaged by databases that then sell it right back to libraries. Like there's all kinds of problems with that. There are a ton of problems with everything we do around every one of these things. This is one that is just as complicated.
One moment. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it's a little after 10, and we are going to stay through the next hour. You're invited for more snacks, and we'll shift into some conversation and networking, or time to ask Professor Flores for more questions. Yes. So if you need to filter out, please feel welcome to do so. We will not be mad at you. Grab a snack, get your free book. But if you're planning to stay, there are several more questions. And so if you're ready for a few more questions, we'll do that for a minute before we change gears. Okay, that was all. I'm going here, and then over here, and then over here.
Okay, so with my major that I'm majoring in, which is computer science, and the career that I want to pursue, which is software engineer, and the expansion on AI, is there a time where AI is going to take over the software engineer industry?
Up to a point. And again, I'm not a computer scientist, right? But this is one of those really interesting cases where the very culture of coding has a lot of sharing built into it, right? And I think, so now AI is very effective at generating code. It's very good with very kind of formulaic and constrained languages, such as code. And one thing that I like to do is I like to do creative coding projects. And I'll share this one example. This is a piece called Huracán Borinqueño, or Puerto Rican hurricane. And what it does, it's written in Spanish, so the translation is sort of an automatic Google Translate. But what I do is this piece generates every 3 minutes, every 30 seconds, a scenario before, during, or after a hurricane passing through Puerto Rico. I first programmed this 1 year after the passage of Hurricane Maria through Puerto Rico in 2017. So this piece was launched as a Twitter bot in 2018. Now, Twitter's no longer Twitter, right? X marks the spot where Elon Musk killed and buried Twitter. However, so I used AI. I'm not that good of a programmer, right? And I used AI to create an HTML standalone page that could take the code I had used for the Twitter bot and implement it to create this piece, right? So what this did was it lowered the access barrier for me as a programmer who knows enough to get himself in trouble, but probably not enough to write the whole thing from scratch, right? And this isn't super sophisticated programming by any account, right? However, you will see, well, you click on Learn More, you can see how this happens, and you can see that, where's the source code? It's focusing on the image. Anyways, I was gonna show you the source code, we can do that later. I think AI will help with the drudgery of programming with fairly basic level stuff. It may help with some more advanced level things. I think you will always need human intelligence to get it beyond. Like, I think it's remix, it's drawing from the past to generate things, and the past and the present only gets it so far. And I think you still need the human guidance for the breakthroughs. So I think we need to be cyborg programmers, not just cyborg writers. So I would say lean into that.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna come around this way.
The after scenarios reference the aftermath and the poor response from the government at the time in supporting Puerto Rico. So it might name names. I don't know, and it is a little political.
So I had some feedback from a student recently who was an international student who said that they used AI iteratively to improve their writing. And indeed their writing, was very good compared to the native speakers in the class.
Yeah.
And it struck me that this was a way in which AI sort of leveled the playing field. I think maybe there's an inherent bias for people who are native English speakers. But it did make me wonder if it becomes more difficult to evaluate students, and in some ways faculty are reluctant to allow students to use AI because if all of the students are turning in incredible work, how do you decide who gets the A, who gets the B? And so I'm wondering if you've encountered this in your own teaching.
Yeah, well, listen, you're talking to someone who believes in, that teaches through ungrading. Another term for it is labor-based grading. As long as students are meeting the assignment parameters and, including, the criteria and the goals of the assignment, the learning outcomes, all of that, they're in the A zone already if they have done that. Sometimes they fail to do that and they get lower grades. And the end result is students still get a very similar spread of grade distribution. So I'm not saying ungrading or labor-based grading leads to everyone getting A's, right? But the question I ask is, what is the goal? Is the goal for students to learn to be effective communicators? And if that means relying or leveraging these technologies to be able to do so despite some real language barriers, then so what, right? Like, yes, do it. This is leveling the playing field. And so, yeah, I say, where's the harm? Does it create dependency on the tools? Yes, it does. But how many tools don't we depend on, right? Like, if it's not in my Google Calendar, it's not happening, right? I don't know. So yeah, Plato was worried about writing as a technology. because it would rot people's brains because they wouldn't have to remember things anymore, because it was all going to be in writing, which was so much worse than the person presenting ideas being able to defend them. And yet here we are on a building, on a world that writing built, right? This is the result of centuries later of writing. So, yeah, we'll see.
Okay, one more question right here.
Thank you. I noticed the great artwork in your presentation, and my first question was to ask what AI you used to generate it.
I use ChatGPT for all
Oh, you did?
these. Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's basically DALL-E, their image generator. I've been doing this for a while. You can see that in some of my other talks. I've been having some fun with the CyberLeos.
I see that. The second part was about prompt engineering and becoming much like everybody. I think what AI is doing is basically allowing everybody to be a philosopher on it and within themselves in a weird kind of way. But I'm thinking in terms of prompt engineering. So everybody's becoming a prompt engineer. How can we become better ethical prompt engineers?
I mean, again,
In terms of resources too, if you have any resources to prompt engineer.
you know, I haven't focused too much on prompt engineering because I find that, I mean, that's a whole area that people are developing, and I don't feel the need to kind of go too deep into that. I find that the iterative approach, so a lot of prompt engineering is about writing this paragraph-long prompt that will kind of hit all the notes in a fairly organized way. So those are the basic principles of it. I prefer to take an iterative approach in which I will ask for something in a fairly sparse, minimal way. I'll offer some guidance, right, about genre, about length, about, you know, don't get too bombastic with the adjectives. You know, sometimes it writes this inflated language as a default that it's very, I don't like, right? So I will give it some of those initial prompts, but then I'll see the output and then I'll say, I'll take an iterative approach and say, no, make this shorter, make this a little more positive, focus on these areas, you know, modify this or that, and then I see the output until I'm satisfied that I can then copy, paste, and edit myself. So that's sort of my approach. When I'm doing creative coding kind of programming, such as this, or in some of my other pieces, like, let me see. This one, I'll show you a fun one. This one, I'll show you a fun one that I developed. This was also based on a bot called Taco Hell Menu. And it generates speculative, you know how Taco Bell is so combinatorial in, like, they'll take X number of ingredients and it's almost like math, right? It exponentially generates new menu items. So I figured, why not do it, you know, like with a computer program that will randomly generate new items. So our newest creation, the Cool Ranch Bean Breakfast Enchilada Combo, is out. Make a run for the fire. Our newest creation, the Triple Breakfast Beef Mexican Pizza, is out. Make a run for the fire. Have you tried the new spicy cheese fry? Get some while supplies last. So there's a call to action, right? Starting today, the spicy Cheetos cheese nachos returns to Taco Hell. Only 500 available per restaurant. Let me see if I can get the just in for our tech. Inspired by his last visit to Mexico. Oh no, hang on. Our head chef has created the deep fried supreme beef burrito. You know you want it, right? So it's a critique, right? But it's a grudgingly, I kind of admire how brazenly combinatorial they are, right? There's no pretense, right? But so anyways, I like to play with that. Again, I generate the engine, I generate the sort of, I use AI to do the programming, and then, but the writing, the ideas, those are mine, right? I'm the guiding creative principle here. And this is true in really in all of my different practices. Thought Clock is an emoji-based piece that presents this figure, think me. It's probably my most autobiographical piece, and what I'm thinking about at any given time during the day. And you can, right now I'm thinking about computers and coffee and files and meeting people. And as the day progresses, right, I start to get hungry and I'm thinking about lunch. And, maybe by the time 5 p.m. rolls around, I'm thinking on happy hour and, being social. And then it's time for dinner and dessert and spending time with the family and getting tired, maybe watching TV. And then I'm getting really tired and I want to go to bed. And then between 11 and 6 a.m., I dream about all the things I dream about during the day, plus a few dream things, all represented by emojis. So there's like castles and dragons and unicorns and my tropical island, Puerto Rico, and birds and theater and things like that. And then the morning comes and it's time for waking up and having coffee and letting the dog and cat out and, commuting and things like that. So anyways, again, it's fun to be creative with these things. Those are examples of digital writing or electronic literature. Anyways, thank you so much for this time. I look forward to our continued conversations.